Chapter 1. Under the pitch-black sky, the continuous mountain range was like a crouching beast, quietly waiting for the break of dawn. At the foot of a small hill shaped like a crouching cow, there was a small village. "Li Er, get up and get to work." A yell broke the silence. A middle-aged woman with a bucket-like waist yelled at the cowshed. In a pile of hay in the cowshed, a skinny young man suddenly woke up from his dream. He thought blankly, "Where am I?" He had that dream again. In the dream, he lived in a city with tall buildings. He played with a magical artifact called a computer all day, and there were steel monsters running amok on the streets. Finally, one day, he was killed by a monster called BMW. Then he suddenly woke up. Yes, he had transmigrated. Over a dozen years had passed. He had almost treated the events of his past life as a dream. Looking around the dirty cowshed, he felt the itch from the mosquito bites. Clearly, this was not a good place. There was probably no other transmigrator in the world as miserable as him. Looking at the time, it had been about 15 years. His parents in this life were the most ordinary farmers in Crouching Ox Village. They passed away when he was young, and he was raised by an older brother. His brother was Li Da, so he was called Li Er. There were not many rules in the village. Many villagers did not have proper names in their lives. With the knowledge of his past life, he gave himself a name, Li Qingshan. There is no need to bury one's bones in the village. Life is full of green mountains. Even though he had transmigrated, he wanted to live well. No, he wanted to live better than he had in his past life. Only then would he not waste the second life that the heavens had given him. He remembered when he had just transmigrated. When he had calmed down from his fear and confusion, the great ambition of a transmigrator was ignited in his chest. However, he soon discovered that he was hungry and had no food to eat. His brother and sister-in-law only treated him as a burden. They threw all the dirty and tiring work to him, but the food he ate was always the worst. There was no familial love at all. He was young and had nowhere to go. He could only try to act like a child prodigy. However, he was thought to be possessed by a ghost. The witch in the village forced him to drink a lot of talisman water, so he did not dare to act rashly anymore. Therefore, the villagers still called him Li Er. Li Qingshan was just a joke. Li Qingshan's sister-in-law scolded him for a while. Seeing that he didn't respond, she rushed in, waved the bamboo stick in her hand, and mercilessly whipped him. "Lazy bones, still pretending to be dead, pretend to be dead." Li Qingshan was thinking about his past and present lives. His mind was in a mess. He suddenly stood up and snatched the bamboo stick, glaring at the peasant woman. Sister Li saw that the child from back then was now a head taller than her. Although she was afraid, her aura was not weak at all. "Li Er, I've raised you so hard and you still dare to be rude to me. When your brother wakes up, I'll let him teach you a lesson. If you don't work, then don't eat." She turned around and left. After Sister Li left, Li Qingshan threw down the bamboo stick and sighed heavily. He walked to the side of the trough and said to an old oxen, "Brother Ox, I've grown up and I don't want to live anymore. I just don't want to leave you." Before his parents died, they divided the family's property. The cottage and the fields were taken by his brother and sister-in-law. Now, the only property he had left was this oxen. Fortunately, he had this ox. He often went to the landlord's house to help, and he could still make a living. If he only ate vegetables at home, he didn't know how thin and weak he would become. Therefore, not only did he not treat it as an animal, but he also respectfully called it Brother Ox. The villagers all said that Li Er could live without Brother Li, but he couldn't live without Brother Ox. The oxen's fur was glossy, and it was plump and sturdy. It was possible to tell just how much effort Li Qingshan had put into taking care of it. However, it also seemed rather old, and one of its horns was missing. The cut was extremely smooth, as if it had been cut off by a sharp blade. The oxen opened its moist eyes and looked at Li Qingshan. As if it had understood him, it gathered its spirit and stood up. Li Qingshan mounted the ox with great familiarity, and the oxen slowly made its way towards the Crouching Ox Hill. Riding on the oxen, Li Qingshan raised his head. The stars were extremely bright, a resplendence that did not exist in that world. He was like a regular cowherd, blowing into the clear flute. The sound of the flute reverberated through the morning mist. Behind him, the village was gradually waking up. On the crouching ox hill, the trees were sparse and the grass was green. Using the light from the east, Li Qingshan gazed towards the west. The mountains stretched endlessly, and if he ventured deeper, he would reach the myriad great mountains. It was said that not only were there wolves, tigers, and leopards, but there were also mountain spirits and ghosts. Even hunters dared not venture too deeply. Li Qingshan had never seen a proper map in the village, nor did he understand the hydrology and geography of this world. All he knew was that the mountains and rivers were extremely lofty, while the rivers were extremely vast. Although it was filled with danger, there was always a great world waiting for him to wander through. Li Qingshan had already made up his mind to leave. In the end, he patted the back of the oxen. "Brother Ox, oh brother Ox, you're already so old. If I sell you, other people will definitely butcher you and eat you. The world is vast, so you should go. There are many wolves, tigers, and leopards in the mountains, so you have to be careful." At a time like this, the smartest thing to do was to sell oxen and gather some traveling expenses. That way, he would have some protection when he arrived in Xingyang City, just in case he starved to death on the streets. However, he refused to do that. Any farmer would laugh if they heard such a childish approach, but this was what he persisted with. "Since you call me big brother, how can I bear to leave you? Even if you can accompany me for a long time, there will still be a time when we part." Li Qingshan replied instinctively, but his voice gradually trailed off. He widened his eyes and stared at Oxen. All he felt was a chill run down his spine. He took a step back. "Demon," Oxen said, "don't be afraid. I won't harm you." After all, they had known each other for so many years, so Li Qingshan was not too afraid. He was just unable to accept this surreal scene for a moment. However, when he thought about everything he had experienced, he calmed down. He frowned and asked in a probing manner, "Are you really Brother Ox?" Seeing how he had calmed down so quickly, Oxen nodded in approval. "You really do possess innate wisdom." "What innate wisdom?" Li Qingshan immediately raised his guard. He definitely did not want anyone to know about his identity as a transmigrator. He thought about how he could still put on an act in front of other people normally, but he was not as vigilant against Oxen. It must have seen all of his actions that did not match his identity and age. In the 6 realms of Sasra, there will occasionally be creatures who retain some memories of their past lives. This is known as innate wisdom. You and I both possess the memories of another identity. We're not regular farmers, Oxen. Being able to meet can be considered as fate. I see. Li Qingshan eased up slightly inside. He had heard about this before, but at least his identity as a transmigrator had not been exposed. "I never thought there really would be demons in this world, and I've even raised one for over a decade. Why didn't you say anything before?" "There's nothing to say. I won't ask where you come from, and you won't ask where I come from either. All you need to know is what I can give you." "Give me what?" "Have you heard of supernatural powers?" Before Li Qingshan could ask, the Black Ox continued, "So-called abilities are the abilities of gods and demons that can penetrate the world. They can move mountains and fill seas, and they can pluck the stars and moon from the sky. If you want to live forever, you can live forever. If you want to live forever, you can live forever. If you want to live forever, you can live forever. Not to mention glory, splendor, wealth, money, and beauties, you can have them at your fingertips. Are you tempted?" The word, supernatural power, contained all the desires of all living beings. Li Qingshan was just one of them, so how could he not be tempted? But the deeper feeling was that it was unbelievable. It was like a person who had been blind for over a decade suddenly opened his eyes. Everything in front of him was so dazzling and full of unreality. Li Qingshan suppressed the excitement in his heart. "Brother Oxen, are you going to teach me that kind of supernatural power?" Oxen shook its head. "You're not qualified yet." It then changed the topic. "If you want to cultivate supernatural powers, you have to eat meat first." What? Li Qingshan wondered if he had heard wrongly. He felt that it was ridiculous. How could a supernatural power that could move mountains and fill seas, and pick the stars and moon be related to such an ordinary thing? The first step of cultivation is refining essence into qi. You have to refine the essence in your body into qi. With your sallow and emaciated appearance, how can you have essence to refine? Li Qingshan smiled bitterly. Anyone who grew up like him would not be able to become strong. And for a person who could not even lift a bucket of water, to talk about moving mountains and filling seas, wasn't it ridiculous? Dare I ask, where does meat come from? How could Li Qingshan not want to eat meat? Compared to the illusory elixirs, the taste of meat was truly engraved in his mind. It made him dream about it at night, and he still missed it. But how could a poor lad who could not even fill his stomach with coarse grains get delicious meat? He couldn't help but stare at the fat and strong body of Brother Oxen, subconsciously dividing it into tenderloin, T-bone, rib and many other parts in his mind, his eyes gleaming with greed. Oxen hit his head. Don't even think about it. Then it raised its hoof and pointed to the 100,000 mountains in the west. The meat is in there. Li Qingshan was surprised instead of delighted. Being a hunter in this world was not that easy. The jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards of the mountains were not to be trifled with. Moreover, the black ox was a living example right before him. As it seemed, the legends of the demons and monsters were not false. If he ran into any one of them, his life would basically be over. But Oxen only told him not to worry and asked him to wait at home. Then it disappeared without a trace. Li Qingshan made his way down the mountain alone. He struggled to calm down from the excitement in his heart. This world was actually so strange and colorful. If he could really become an immortal and travel through the mountains, it would not be a waste of the name he had given himself. When Li Qingshan returned home, his elder brother Li had already gone to the fields. Only his sister-in-law was leaning against the door and eating melon seeds. She rolled her eyes a few times when she saw him. Ordinary women and men who went out to work in the fields would either run the household chores or weave cloth to earn some money. But she was famous for being lazy in the village. She threw all the chores at home to Li Qingshan. She had never even touched a loom. Li Qingshan pretended not to see her. He stepped into the house and lifted the lid of the pot. There was not even any leftovers in the pot, let alone hot food and rice. Sister-in-law said in a strange tone, "We don't have rice to feed idle people. Why don't you take the ox and help steward Lu?" She suddenly thought of something and asked, "Where is the ox?" Chapter 2. I lost it. Li Qingshan answered stiffly, as if he had been knocked back to the cruel reality from a fantasy world. "Hurry up and go look for it. If you dare to lose our family's cow, your brother will beat you to death when he comes back. If the cow is gone, you'd better get lost too." "That's my cow." Li Qingshan strode out of the door. If he didn't leave, he might not be able to stop himself from beating this woman up. However, if he really did that, he would no longer be able to stay at home. He would no longer be able to take shelter under the eaves of others. It wasn't until dusk that he returned to the cowshed, exhausted. His bright eyes looked around the empty cowshed, and then dimmed again. Apart from herding the cows and cleaning up, Li Qingshan's daily work was to bring the cows to the landlord's house in the village to help out and earn some money to supplement his family's expenses. Today, without the cow, he could only do the same work as the other long-term workers. Even adults would find it hard to do that kind of work, let alone a young man like him who hadn't even eaten breakfast. Compared to the exhaustion of his body, the insults and curses from the farm manager were nothing more than a trivial matter. He fell head first into the haystack and didn't want to think about anything else. However, his stomach started to growl again. It was conceivable that in such an environment, any interest would be worn down to the point where only the most basic physical needs were left. Li Qingshan was in a daze when he heard a bang. It was the sound of something heavy falling on the ground. He opened his eyes and saw a strange face with a pair of long white tusks. He couldn't help but jump in fright. When he woke up, he saw that it was a wild boar. It had just died and it was still warm. Oxen was lying in front of the trough, smiling at him. He could already vaguely make out the expression on Oxen's face. Night fell. In the village house, Mrs. Li was complaining to Brother Li, "That little bastard is too inhumane. He even lost such a big cow. No, he must have secretly sold it. No, we must separate from the family. If we continue living like this, we will be in trouble." Elder Brother Li was in his 30s. He was tall and strong, and he was famous for being tyrannical in the village. However, he was extremely respectful towards his wife. But after we split up, those few acres of good land were given to him in front of the elders in the village. They used the reason that Li Qingshan was too young to farm as an excuse to occupy this piece of land. They didn't want to return it now, but if they officially separated from the family, they would have to return it. Hasn't Steward Lu always wanted this piece of land? We might as well sell it to them. If that little bastard has the guts, he can go ask him for it. But what if he doesn't want to? Starve him for 3 days, aren't you worried that he won't agree? While the two were discussing, Mrs. Li suddenly sniffed and said, "Do you smell something? It smells so good. It seems like someone's cooking meat. It's not New Year's Day, why are they cooking meat? It seems it's nearby." The two followed the smell and came to the cowshed. They saw a pot in the cowshed with firewood burning under it. The soup in the pot was boiling, and a fragrant smell spread. The fire swayed in the darkness, casting Li Qingshan's shadow on the wall. Mrs. Li swallowed her saliva and said, "You little bastard, where did you steal the meat?" She was not only lazy but also greedy. Looking at the pot of meat soup, she even forgot that Li Qingshan had offended her. She went forward and picked up the spoon to stir it. However, Elder Brother Li's eyes were sharp. He saw what Li Qingshan was sitting on and exclaimed, "Wild boar." Wild boars could be said to be extremely dangerous in the mountains. Its skin was rough and thick, and it was difficult to be injured by swords. Ordinary hunters would retreat when they saw it, let alone capture it. When I was looking for a cow, I picked it up at the foot of the mountain. It was injured, probably because it was chased by hunters and had nowhere else to go. Li Qingshan made up an excuse. The existence of oxen must be kept a secret. Otherwise, if the news of the demon cow spread, who knew when the heavenly palace would come to find them? Elder Brother Li was skeptical, but he also laughed and said, "Brother, you are a fool with a fool's luck. When I bring this pig to the market, I can definitely sell it for a good price and save it for your wife." At the same time, he also saw the oxen in the cowshed. He thought that there was no need to rush to separate from him. The cow could still do some farm work. Li Qingshan watched as the sister-in-law stirred in the pot as if all she wanted to do was try a piece. His good mood from cooking the meat was immediately destroyed. With a smack, he smacked the sister-in-law's hand away. "Don't touch it." Sister-in-law Li covered her hand and stepped back. She wailed, "Look at your brother. I told you that he bullied a woman when you weren't at home. You didn't believe me. Now he's doing it in front of you." "Bullied you?" Li Qingshan only felt a wave of nausea. "If your surname was Pan, I wouldn't have suffered a loss." Elder Brother Li's face suddenly became gloomy. "Is this how you act as an uncle?" Li Qingshan lowered his head and said, "I have my own plans for this meat. I'm not young anymore. It is time for us to separate." This was something he had been thinking about when he was cooking the meat. He was no longer willing to bow his head under the eaves of this house. Elder Brother Li did not expect that before he could say anything, Li Qingshan would bring it up first. He was stunned for a moment and then became angry. He was a stupid farmer and could not hold back his anger. He clenched his fists and stepped forward, wanting to beat up Li Qingshan and drag this wild boar away first. Li Qingshan saw that Elder Brother Li's momentum was not right. He also stood up. His face was grim, but his heart felt a little weak. His bones were not fully grown yet. He had been tired for a day and had not eaten anything. How could he fight against a grown man? He glanced at Oxen from the corner of his eyes, but Oxen only watched this scene as if it was watching a show. It had no intention of helping. Just as Li Qingshan was groaning in his heart and preparing to receive a beating, Elder Brother Li stopped in his tracks and looked at Li Qingshan's right hand. In that rough hand was a short knife that was equally rough. The blade was full of impurities. Even though it had been carefully polished, it was still dull and lusterless. This was a short knife that Xianxia had bought from the bazaar after living frugally all these years. It was useful in many places. Just now, he was using this knife to cut meat. Xianxia immediately understood that his elder brother was afraid. He was not afraid of himself, but of this knife. And before this moment, he had never realized that the shoddy knife in his hand had the power to deter others. In his previous life, Xianxia was only an ordinary student. Although he had fought a few times, it was just disputes between fellow students. In both of his lives, he had never had the experience of facing a weapon. Understanding this, Xianxia clenched the knife in his hand and deliberately raised it up, like a wild beast showing off its fangs, even though he did not dare to use it. Elder brother Li immediately took a step back, and Mrs. Li also did not dare to howl. In the end, the two of them actually retreated from the cowshed with extremely disappointed expressions. They cursed outside for a while before returning to their room to discuss their grand plan. However, Xianxia turned a deaf ear to it. He even tossed the fragrance of the meat to the back of his mind. All he did was stare at the dagger blankly. His face was vaguely reflected in the dagger. This cheap item of a few taels of silver had just protected him, preventing him from physical pain and humiliation. Moreover, it had protected his spoils of battle. Although this was a matter of course, at this moment, it was as if he had suddenly become enlightened. Oxen was lying in front of the trough, smiling at him. The flames flickered, and the black giant stood on the wall with the knife in his hand. At this moment, a young man understood the exact value of strength. After a long time, Xianxia sat down again, scratching his ears and cheeks as he looked at the pot. How much longer will this meat need to cook? He had always been a person who could not live without meat. These past 10 years had been really bitter for him. When his parents were still alive, he could still eat a few mouthfuls of meat during festivals. But after his parents passed away, the meat they cut was not even enough for Mrs. Li. At this moment, even if there was a bottle of immortal pills in front of him, it would not make him as anxious as this pot of meat. The pig was a big pig, and this pot of meat had been cooking for half the night. The rising flames, the drifting aroma, the crackling sounds, and the focused young man formed a scene that was neither romantic nor poetic, but extremely simple and primitive. In the end, although there was not even a bit of salt, not to mention other spices, it made Xianxia eat so much that he almost swallowed his tongue. Regardless of fat or lean, several kilograms of cooked meat entered his stomach, and in the end, even the broth was completely drunk. At this moment, if someone asked Xianxia what happiness was, he would definitely say that happiness was a pot of meat. Chapter 3. Xianxia laid down on the pile of hay in satisfaction. He stretched out his limbs and fell asleep before he knew it. That night, he did not dream of his past life again. In the hut near the cowshed, the elder Li and his wife tossed and turned restlessly due to the smell of meat. They only fell asleep in the middle of the night as well. The next morning, right after the rooster crowed 3 times, a short, plump man in emerald green silk robes arrived at the fields. He was none other than the largest landlord in the tiny crouching ox village, Old Master Lu, who was also the caretaker Lu that the elder Li's wife mentioned. Because he had once served as a caretaker for a large clan in the city, he received the blessing of the clan when he grew old, allowing him to return to his hometown in glory. However, he still wanted to be referred to as Caretaker Lu so that he could display his completely different status from these bumpkins and distinguish himself from regular bumpkin landlords. And because most of the land in the village had been annexed by him through various methods, he gained the elegant name of Half-Village Lu. If Half-Village Lu had any ambitions, it would obviously be to become Lu Chuansuan. However, he could not rush this. Using the words he had heard from the mister in the city, it was to take it slow. He believed he would definitely be able to fulfill this wish within his lifetime. By then, everyone in the village would be his workers, and he would be the local tyrant of the village. He could do whatever he wanted. However, Caretaker Lu was rather displeased right now. He saw that there were not a lot of workers working on his land. He waved his plump hand. Why are there only a few people? Where are the others? A worker smiled along. Caretaker Lu, they've all gone to help Li'er build a house. Li'er? Which Li'er? That cowherd. Of course I know. Where did he get the money from? That kid got lucky. He picked up a huge wild boar for free. As long as anyone in the village is willing to help him build a house, they'll be given a large piece of pork. It's right below the Crouching Ox Hill. It's very popular right now. Then why aren't you going? I've fallen out with him, the worker said awkwardly. He was extremely reluctant. That was meat. How could he eat it normally? Caretaker Lu fiddled with his mustache. Let's go and have a look too. As soon as he woke up, Li Qingshan began to work on the separation of the family. The most important thing was to build a decent house for himself. He couldn't live under someone else's roof anymore. In the past, he did not have such an ability, but with this big wild boar, many things were easily solved. With a slight call, many people came to help, and he could say that he had seen the magic of pork in this world. The scenery below the Crouching Ox Hill was picturesque. If this were his past life, a place like this would either be a tourist attraction or a residential area for wealthy people. Why would he have the right to occupy it? Moreover, this place was far away from the village, so it was convenient for him to keep secrets. He could communicate with oxen without worry. Li Qingshan stood among the crowd and gave out commands. He was in an indescribably good mood, and he somewhat understood what oxen meant by eating meat. It wasn't just to strengthen one's body. If it was a person without food and clothing, he would spend all day in order to fill his stomach. How would he have the mood to do other things, let alone see his true nature? Caretaker Lu stood in the distance and glanced over. He muttered to himself, in other words, the brothers are going to split up. However, he just happened to see the eldest Li couple watching from afar as well. Not only were they unhappy when they saw their brother move to a new house, but they even ground their teeth in resentment. As a result, he came up with a plan and walked over with a smile. In less than a dozen days, a new house was completed. Everyone collected their pork and dispersed. Li Qingshan gazed at his new residence in satisfaction. It was just a regular mud house with a thatch covering it. He stood in a small courtyard surrounded by a fence. But this was his new home. It was the first step for him to settle down in this world. Over the past few days, he had been eating meat every day, so his complexion had recovered a healthy glow. He had gained some confidence as he stood there. Although it had only been around a dozen days, he seemed to have grown a few inches out of nowhere. Just as Li Qingshan was feeling happy, an old woman with white hair and wrinkled skin walked into the courtyard. She seemed to be startled. Li Erlang, your house is not well built. It's very ominous. Li Qingshan frowned. This was the witch who gave him the water talisman when he was young. All day long, she played tricks and fooled these ignorant and backward villagers. He never had a good impression of her. However, she had great prestige in the village. If there were any weddings or funerals in the village, they would ask her for divination. Of course, during the divination, there was no lack of offerings to worship the gods. Li Qingshan did not dare to be negligent. He bowed and said, "Why are you here?" The witch did not even look at him. She looked around the house and said, "There's yin qi and evil spirits here. Luckily, I'm prepared." She held a jar in one hand and a willow branch in the other. She dipped the willow branch into the water in the jar and sprinkled it around the house and yard. She shouted, "Go, go!" Li Qingshan could not stop her. He could only let her do whatever she wanted. Although he already believed in ghosts and gods, he did not believe that there was any yin qi or evil spirits here. There was a real monster following him. If there was really something wrong, oxen would naturally tell him. It would not be her turn. After the witch sprinkled the water, she seemed to have done Li Qingshan a great favor. She nagged a lot more. It was nothing more than that Li Qingshan could only have this luck because of the god's gift. Now it was time to return the god's gift. The best thing to worship the god was naturally the big pig head left behind by the wild boar. Li Qingshan finally understood why she came. He said, "I'm afraid it's not the god who wants to eat it. It's you who wants to eat it, right?" Faced with Li Qingshan's little rudeness, the witch flew into a rage. She straightened her body and said in a different voice, Li Qingshan, if you don't listen to my advice, there will be a disaster. Li Qingshan knew that this was the witch's trick of inviting the god to possess her. If an ordinary villager saw this trick, they would be scared pale and kneel down to cow. Even the original Li Qingshan did not dare to completely ignore it. But now was different from the past. He crossed his arms as if he was watching a joke. He said, there is no door to fortune or disaster. Only people can bring it on themselves. What does it have to do with the god? Please. Seeing that this trick did not work, the witch returned to her original state and said gloomily, just you wait. Not long after the witch left, the disaster really did come. A villager came to invite Li Qingshan to the ancestral hall. Although the village was small, there were many rules. The separation of the family from his brother should have been done in the ancestral hall in front of the village elders. However, he should have been the one to bring it up first. Did his brother beat him to it? Li Qingshan felt rather uneasy, but oxen was nowhere to be seen, so he could only brace himself. The so-called ancestral hall was just a small house with a very deep doorway, but it was a rare brick building in the village. Inside, the ancestral tablets of the ancestors of the Li and Lu families were enshrined. In the pitch-black house, a few old people stood to the left and right. At the very front was the village head of Crouching Ox Village. He was in his 60s and had a crooked back. He was also a member of the Li family. According to seniority, Li Qingshan had to call him grandfather. The Li couple were already waiting there. As soon as they saw Li Qingshan, they glared at him viciously, as if Li Qingshan had harmed them somehow. There was a hint of delight from revenge in their gazes. Li Qingshan ignored them. He only bowed to the old people before beginning the separation under the village head's supervision. Originally, Li Qingshan thought that all he would get was oxen and a few acres of farmland. He never thought it would actually be much more complicated than he had imagined. The village head was stern and impartial. He gave many miscellaneous items to Li Qingshan, such as a spoon and a pair of chopsticks. With each item, the sister-in-law's heart would twitch painfully. Her gaze towards Li Qingshan became more and more vicious. Li Qingshan remained unfazed. He remained composed. Moreover, the miscellaneous items were all useful, so he did not have to buy them all again. After a whole hour, the village head stopped just now. He looked around with his murky eyes. Do you have any objections? The Li couple accepted it, but Li Qingshan felt that something was off. Grandfather, what about those acres of farmland? What farmland? Li Qingshan was stunned. When his father and mother passed away in the past, they had said it clearly in front of this person. They were afraid that his elder brother would bully him, so they wanted this esteemed old man of the village to uphold justice for him. The sister-in-law had already spoken. You're still young and ignorant. Those two old things didn't return the money they borrowed. They've already paid them back. Li Qingshan flew into a rage. What did you call my father and mother? Say that again. Although he did not have any particularly deep feelings for them, they were still his birth parents in this life. How could he allow someone to humiliate them in public? Brother Li had already stood in front of the sister-in-law. A few men also walked in from outside the ancestral hall. It was obvious that they were prepared. Li Qingshan also noticed that these people were all scoundrels from the village. Normally, all they did was steal from others and bully others. They did not care about the camaraderie of fellow villagers at all. They would never show mercy when they laid their hands on them. The village head secretly cursed the stupid woman and sighed, I've already checked the receipt. Where is the receipt? Brother Li replied, we've already burned it when we got it. May I know who he owes money to? The sister-in-law proudly said, the village's steward Lu. If you have the guts, go and ask for it. See if steward Lu doesn't skin you alive. What's the matter? I'm just bullying an ungrateful little bastard like you. Those acres of farmland were all fertile farmland. They were sold for some money. It could be considered as making up for not being able to eat pork. She made up her mind that once she got home, she would buy a chicken to eat. Li Qingshan was so angry that his whole body trembled. His nails pierced into his palms. Based on his 2 lives' worth of experience, How could he not know the inside story? Farmers regarded the land as their lifeblood. How could they casually compensate other people? His parents also dug in the soil for food all their lives. How could they possibly borrow money from other people? This was clearly an alliance to bully him. After losing the land, if he wanted to eat and live, he could only go to Steward Lu's farm and work as a long-term worker. Even if he was angry, he would have to endure it. What a good plan. At home, Li Qingshan was treated coldly by his brother and sister-in-law. It was only because of his poor food and clothing. He could still accept it. However, it was different to distort the truth like this. In his previous life, he mingled on the internet. He thought that he had seen all the dark sides of society and was angry because of it. However, when this kind of thing happened to him, he found it hard to bear. If he agreed, it would mean that he accepted the village's distribution. He would not have a chance to appeal. Chapter 4. The atmosphere in the ancestral hall froze for a moment. The village head's face sank. What, Li Erlang, are you dissatisfied with my arrangements? The ruffians and scoundrels had already begun to rub their palms together. The favous-headed man in the lead even held a chopping knife in his hand. The other elders either closed their eyes or tried to persuade him, "Waiter, don't be angry. You can't win against him. Caretaker Lu allowed you to work in the estate. He'll pay you more. Why don't you have food to eat?" Li Qingshan gave a muffled reply. He left the ancestral hall by some unknown means. When he left, he even tripped over the favous-headed man and almost fell, leaving behind a wave of laughter. He came across the witch along the way, and she smiled complacently. Disaster, disaster. If you worship the god now, it's still not too late. Li Qingshan returned to his new residence below Crouching Ox Hill and laid down. He no longer felt any joy at all. The sun set in the west, and the sky darkened. The crowing of chickens and barking of dogs gradually died down, and the village recovered its peace. Oxen strolled in from outside. Li Qingshan propped himself up. Just when he was about to speak, Oxen said, "I saw everything, but I didn't help you. I didn't want your help. I don't care about those fields either. You can't accept this?" "Yes. There are plenty of things in the world where black and white are indistinguishable and right and wrong are inverted. Let alone a mere mortal like you. Even immortals, Buddhas, and saints with extraordinary powers have times when they feel wronged and humiliated. What's a little bit of pettiness like yours?" Li Qingshan shot a glance at him. "But I don't want to accept it." Suddenly he thought of the dagger again. Oxen stared at him silently for quite a while before suddenly laughing aloud. All right. As long as you don't want to accept it. When a man goes about his business, he is quick to repay kindness and vengeance. The kindness of a single meal must be repaid, and the hatred of a single grudge must be avenged. Originally, I thought your willpower had been worn down over the years, but you actually still have some manliness in you. Only like that can you be worthy of my guidance." Li Qingshan was taken aback. "You're testing me?" The green ox sniffed and said, "This is considered a test? I'm just asking which path you want to take." "Which path?" Li Qingshan did not understand. There are thousands of ways in the world. There are ways to swallow one's anger and protect one's own life, and there are also ways to rise with a sword and die for a noble cause. Humans have the human path, demons have the demon path, gods have the divine path, and ghosts have the ghost path. Each path has its own glory, and each path has its own choice. Li Qingshan felt dizzy as he listened to it, Dao, non-stop. "Are you going to sing a song, Dao, 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 for me?" At the end of the conversation, he interrupted, "I will seek my own path." Oxen was startled at first, then delighted. "You actually understood. That's right, there are thousands of great Daos. I will seek my own Dao." Li Qingshan took out a big gourd out of nowhere, and the gourd flew into his hand by itself. "Since you refuse to swallow your anger, I'll teach you a way that doesn't require you to swallow your anger." Li Qingshan felt something heavy in his hand, as if there was some kind of liquid swaying in it. He opened the bottle and a strong smell of alcohol assaulted him. Li Qingshan smiled bitterly. After eating meat, he would drink wine? It seemed reasonable, but who would rely on these two things to cultivate? If eating meat and drinking wine could help one become an immortal, then all the rich people in the world would become immortals. Could it be that immortals were all good for nothings? Oxen only said 8 words: meat strengthens the body, and wine strengthens the liver and gallbladder. Li Qingshan clenched his teeth, raised his head, and gulped down the wine. Although it was only the village's unrefined wine, he still felt dizzy after drinking the gourd. He stared blankly at Oxen. Could it be that it wanted him to drown his sorrows in wine? Go kill someone, and I'll teach you cultivation. Oxen said in an extremely calm tone, as if it was talking about something insignificant. Then it lay down. Li Qingshan felt a chill run down his spine. He suddenly realized that the thing in front of him wasn't a hard-working old bull that had been plowing the fields with him for more than 10 years, but a real bull spirit. What it taught him was not the peaceful Tao of immortals and Buddhas, but the fierce and domineering Tao of demons. It hadn't taught him any cultivation techniques, it only taught him to eat meat, drink wine, and now, kill people. Was he really going to kill people? Faces appeared in front of him. He hated these people and he wanted nothing more than to kill them, but he knew that he didn't dare to do so. Oxen also saw through this, which was why he wanted to drink wine to strengthen his courage. Was this a proof of allegiance, or a gift to become his disciple? Thinking back to what happened today, the drunkenness and anger rose. Li Qingshan raised his head, took a deep breath, and lowered his head. Kill who? That's your problem. I'll say it first, I won't help you, and I won't save you. I'm just an ordinary bull. Tonight, the moon was bright, sprinkling a layer of white frost on the ground. Li Qingshan walked alone on the white frost. He felt that the full moon above his head was so dazzling that he wished for a dark cloud to cover it up. The village was silent. Li Qingshan's footsteps swayed as he walked around the village. His heart was at a loss. He came to the front of a rundown house, and there was a hubbub coming from inside. Li Qingshan heard it clearly. It was the ruffians from the ancestral hall today. He hurriedly squatted down against the wall and listened to what they were saying. Today's wine came so easily. I just stood in the ancestral hall, and Steward Lu gave me so much. Li Qingshan recognized the voice at once. It was patch-haired Lu, a famous ruffian in the village. He spent his days idling around and stealing things. He was surly and fierce, and he often carried a chopping knife with him. The villagers were afraid of him, and even if they caught him stealing, they didn't dare to do anything to him. The other ruffians also treated him as their leader. This is all because of you, big brother. Didn't you see that kid's face? He was so scared that it turned pale. The room roared with laughter. Li Qingshan didn't know what his face was like at the time, but it was definitely red now. His drunkenness mixed with anger rushed to his head. It's a pity that the coward didn't make a move. I haven't exercised my fists and legs in a long time. I was going to use him to practice, but that bastard never took me seriously. Li Qingshan had lived 2 lives, but he wasn't as afraid of him as the ordinary villagers. He didn't expect to attract such hostility. Isn't it easy for Big Brother to beat him up? That idiot built his house outside the village. Wouldn't it be easy for us to beat him up? We can also take his cow and sell it at the market. We can even exchange it for a few drinks. The other ruffians agreed one after another. Li Qingshan let out a breath that reeked of alcohol and tightened his grip on the short knife in his arms. Patch-haired Lu drank a bellyful of alcohol and went outside the house to pee. He didn't return to the house, but walked along the small path to the south of the village. Li Qingshan felt strange and immediately followed him. He saw that patch-haired Lu came to the door of the famous widow Lu in the village and shouted for her to open the door. Only then did he know what he wanted to do. The door was tightly shut, and the lights in the house were not turned on. It was obvious that they were afraid of him. There were a few thatched cottages not far away, but no one paid any attention to them. Patch-haired Lu took advantage of his drunkenness and said a lot of obscenities. He kicked the door hard and cursed for a while, causing the dogs in the village to bark loudly. Then he turned around and left. Inside the door, Widow Lu calmed down a little. She peeked outside through the crack in the door and saw that patch-haired Lu had indeed gone far away. Only then did she relax. Suddenly, her eyes flashed and she saw a figure following behind patch-haired Lu. The night was dark, so she couldn't see the figure's clothes and appearance clearly. She thought it was his attendant, and she faintly felt that something was wrong. Li Qingshan followed patch-haired Lu to a desolate place. He made up his mind, shouted, and pounced on him. Patch-haired Lu turned around in shock and saw a dull short knife stabbing at him. He immediately sobered up and wanted to run away to resist, but his hands and feet were weak. He usually only used a knife to scare the common people and fought in a few group fights. He had never experienced a real life and death fight. Although the other party was only a youth, his decisiveness and murderous aura made him look like a fierce beast in the mountains. Without any obstruction, the knife entered his body. Li Qingshan didn't expect that the usually arrogant patch-haired Lu would be so weak. Looking at the frightened and pleading look on patch-haired Lu's face, he seemed to be even more drunk. His eyes faintly glowed red, and his brain seemed to stop working. Only his hands kept moving. The blade and blood-red light danced about in the darkness. By the time Li Qingshan had calmed down, patch-haired Lu had already collapsed in a pool of blood. He was as dead as he could be. The heavy smell of blood also gave off a chilly smell in the moonlit night. Li Qingshan forcefully composed himself and turned around to leave. He rushed to the stream below Crouching Ox Hill in a single breath. Just now he stopped. Illuminated by the water, he could not help but leap in fright. Is this still me? The water reflected a bloodied youth. He pursed his lips and widened his eyes, still radiating with killing intent that had yet to disperse. It was extremely terrifying. Li Qingshan cupped the icy cold stream water and washed away the blood on his body. Only then did he return to the hut. He ignored Oxen who lay beside him and collapsed on the bed. Only now did his hands begin to tremble, and he suddenly became covered in cold sweat, drenching his clothes. He had completely sobered up. Oxen asked with a smile, "Aren't you going to run?" It was as if it was not the one who had told Li Qingshan to kill people. Li Qingshan said, "Do I still need to run if I'm going to kill something like that?" He had not chosen patch-haired Lu out of a moment of impulse. This bastard was utterly wicked in the village. No one would stand up for him, and if the people did not report him, the officials would not investigate him. As long as he did not leave behind any overly obvious evidence, the death of someone like him would probably end up unresolved. The praise in Oxen's eyes deepened. It was very easy to find an ignorant person who would kill in a fit of rage, but it was very difficult to know who to kill and who not to kill, as well as how to protect oneself while killing. Even if the composure before him was an act, it was enough to demonstrate his willpower. Li Qingshan's trembling hands could not fool it, but in its eyes, not only were there no shame in killing people, but there were also people who were vicious and looked down on killing people everywhere. However, it was truly impressive that he could suppress his nervousness and fear until now to erupt. After quite a while, Oxen asked, "How do you feel?" "So scary. So satisfying." These were Li Qingshan's heartfelt words. After the fear, he actually felt an indescribable sense of contentment. Most of the pent-up anger in his chest had dissipated. He recalled the feeling when he watched Water Margin, Instructor Lin at the Wind Snow Mountain Holy Temple, and Wu Erlang's blood splattered on the lover's brothel. Oxen chuckled. "Go to sleep. There are many things to do tomorrow." Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat, and he revealed a joyful expression. "You mean?" Chapter 5. Oxen didn't reply and closed his eyes. Li Qingshan lay flat on his bed. Although his face remained calm, his heart was surging uncontrollably. He didn't fall asleep even when it was late at night. But once the taut string in his heart relaxed, he felt even more tired than after a day of farm work, so he immediately fell asleep. That night, he dreamed that he was enemies with millions of people. He killed until a mountain of corpses covered the sun and a sea of blood and stars sank. When he woke up, the dream faded like the tide. The sun shone brightly in the room and it was already high in the sky. Patch-haired Lu's death was like a drop of cold water in a pot of boiling oil. It set off a huge uproar in the village. This fellow had done all kinds of evil in the village. Now that he was finally dead, the ordinary villagers all clapped their hands and cheered, saying that it was retribution. But then they guessed who did it. Although there were many people who had grudges against Patch-haired Lu, there weren't many who dared to take revenge. There were no secrets in a small village. The villagers thought about it and thought about what happened in the ancestral hall yesterday. But that person didn't come to see the big show, which confirmed their guess. Li Erlang killed someone. He usually doesn't make a sound, but he actually has such courage. I'm afraid he's already escaped. Amidst the quiet discussion, the faces of the eldest Li couple were deathly pale. Steward Lu and village chief Li's faces were as dark as water. The ruffians were so scared that their legs turned to jelly. If they had gone out last night, would they be lying here right now? Someone cried out in surprise, Li Erlang is here. The crowd automatically opened up a path. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Li Qingshan walked with large strides to the side of patch-haired Lu's corpse. He didn't feel it last night because of the dusky sky, but today he also felt that the death was horrifying. But he didn't show it on his face. He only said, "It's good that he died." His gaze swept across the crowd from left to right. Everyone felt that in one night, Li Qingshan seemed to have changed into a different person. He became somewhat frightening. Everyone who was looked at by him felt a chill run down their backs. And those who were directly involved were even more frightened. Village chief Li said, "Tie up Li Er and send him to the ancestral hall." Crouching Ox Village was just too remote. It was basically an autonomous village. If there was anything, the elders in the village would discuss and resolve it. Even if it was a murder case, they would have to capture the person first and send him to the government. It was impossible to count on the bosses of the government to travel several dozen kilometers to a place like this to capture the person. Therefore, they basically didn't have any dealings with the yamen and directly carried out private executions in the village. The villagers were in an uproar. Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows and shouted, "Who dares?" Even though he did not have a weapon in his hand, his murderous aura was like an unsheathed sword, showing off its edge. None of the villagers stepped forward, not only because they were afraid of Li Qingshan. There was a scale in everyone's heart, and the villagers' thinking was even more simple. "Village chief, you colluded with the tyrants and bullied the kind, what right do you have to order us?" The villagers also watched Erlang grow up, and he even called you grandpa. You really have the heart to do this. This patch-haired Lu deserved to die. Erlang did this to rid the people of evil. Patch-haired Lu got drunk and fell to his death. What does this have to do with Erlang? The one who spoke was Zhang Wuge, who had a great grudge against patch-haired Lu. Patch-haired Lu had once tried to bully his wife when he was working in the fields. Back then, he was tempted to fight it out with this bastard, but his wife had bitterly persuaded him not to. Now that he saw his corpse lying on the ground, he felt indescribably carefree. Someone immediately echoed, Yeah, he fell to his death. This is all retribution from the heavens." For a moment, there was a hubbub of voices. They all said patch-haired Lu died in an accident. They completely ignored the holes in patch-haired Lu's body on the ground. When they looked at Li Qingshan, their gazes became a little more respectful. Li Qingshan suddenly became rather moved. This was the so-called public opinion. Village chief Li knew that if this continued, his authority in the village would definitely be greatly affected. Furthermore, he really was rather afraid of Li Qingshan's revenge. If he had known that this kid was so vicious, he definitely would not have twisted his mouth over some silver. The villagers didn't listen to his commands. Those ruffians were even worse than ordinary people, so they had already sneaked away. He could only take a look at Steward Lu. He should be able to command the servants and workers in the family, but Steward Lu pretended not to see them. In any case, it was Big Li who insisted on selling the land to him, and he didn't show up. His family was big, so why should he go head-on with such a strong person over such a trivial matter? Moreover, if he was not careful, he would incite the anger of the people. Unknowingly, he had already treated Li Qingshan as a strong person. Possessed by a demon, possessed by a demon. I told you, which suddenly pointed at Li Qingshan and howled. The villagers' expressions changed greatly. They couldn't help but move a little further away from Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan stepped forward and kicked her down. You old hag, how long are you going to falsely accuse me? If you dare to say another word, I'll tear your mouth apart. Which let out an "Io," and didn't dare to say anything. She only stared at him with a venomous gaze. Li Qingshan was unafraid. If you really have supernatural powers, then let your ghosts come and find me. Let's see if I'm afraid or not. After saying this, he walked out of the crowd with his head held high. He walked to a place where there was no one around. Just now, his aura had been released. He felt his heart beating violently, but he knew that he had made the right move. If he hid in his house out of fear and gave village head Li time to mobilize the villagers, someone would come to arrest him before nightfall. With his current physique, could he really fight against 3 to 5 burly men? Only by taking a risky move, suppressing the others with his aura and obtaining justice, could he truly be safe and sound. When he returned to the thatched cottage, oxen had already been waiting for a long time. He looked up and down at Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan also noticed the strange atmosphere. He went forward and bowed respectfully. He raised his head and asked with a smile, Brother Ox, do you still need to hold a banquet to formally acknowledge me as your master? Oxen said, which of your wine and meat wasn't brought by me? What banquet to formally acknowledge me as your master? Li Qingshan spread his arms and said, I'll help you gather some tender grass, all right? Oxen's eyes darkened. Stop joking around. Since you have the intention to kill, that's why I taught you the art of killing. In the future, you'll inevitably have to fight with others. You won't have a single day of peace. If your cultivation isn't enough and you get killed, you'll have no regrets. The weak are prey to the strong. It doesn't matter where I go. I don't dare to say that I have no regrets, that's all. Oxen said, no regrets? Since you've made up your mind, I'll teach you the ox demon's fist of great strength. When you've cultivated the strength of a bull and laid down your foundation, I'll teach you the tiger demon's fist of bone training. With these 2 skills, you'll be able to practice the supernatural power of Daoism, the strength of 9 bulls and 2 tigers. By then, you'll be able to do whatever you want in the world. The strength of 9 bulls and 2 tigers? When Li Qingshan first heard about it, he found it quite ordinary. What was so special about 9 oxen and 2 tigers? They were just the most ordinary of livestock and wild beasts. Were they really worthy of being called supernatural abilities? Could they run amok in the world? But when he thought about it carefully, he was shocked. He had been herding bulls for more than 10 years and knew how strong a bull was. A bull's strength was equivalent to 10 strong men. As long as one could obtain the strength of 1 bull, they would be able to wear armor and fight on the battlefield. They would be worthy of the title of a fierce general. There was nothing special about 9 bulls and 2 tigers, but if all these strengths were gathered on one person, he would have the strength of 1,000 caddies with just a lift of his hand. Who would be able to stop him? Even if Lu Bu was reborn and Li Yuanba was alive, they wouldn't be able to stop a light punch from him. But since it's a supernatural power of Daoism, why is it called the ox demon and the tiger demon? This supernatural power was originally an ancient supernatural power. It's been lost now. When Li Qingshan heard the word ancient, he became excited. From what he knew, any elixirs, secret manuals, or treasures, as long as they were related to the word ancient, they would be extremely powerful. But Oxen's following explanation disappointed him. The reason why this supernatural power was lost was because it was too difficult to use. It was replaced by other supernatural powers created by the geniuses of later generations. In short, it was eliminated. The ancient sages were indeed powerful, but the later generations might not necessarily be inferior to the predecessors. Moreover, they were standing on the shoulders of the predecessors. The cultivators of the current era value the cultivation of qi and look down on the cultivation of the body. They even refer to the body as a smelly bag. This kind of supernatural power that pursues brute force naturally won't be taken seriously. You don't have to be too disappointed. This supernatural power that I'm teaching you is no longer the original version. It was modified by a powerful figure of the demon race. That's why it's called the ox demon and the tiger demon. The ox demon cultivates the body, while the tiger demon cultivates the bones. As the saying goes, when the Tao rises 1 foot, the devil rises 10. Its power is also much stronger. Are there any drawbacks to cultivating this supernatural power with my human body? I don't know. Because no one has tried it before, I might go berserk and become a demon. Oxen said it casually, but Li Qingshan could only smile bitterly. It was fine if he cultivated an ancient supernatural power that had been lost for a long time. At most, he would become a weirdo and be laughed at by other cultivators. However, cultivating a supernatural power that had been modified by the hands of a demon could turn him into a monster. He might even be slain by the demons. But now was not the time for him to be picky. Li Qingshan thought for a moment and took a deep breath. Brother Ox, please teach me this supernatural power. If someone could understand his desire to change his fate, they would understand that he would accept even the devil's help. Oxen explained the essence of the ox demon's fist of great strength to him in detail. Li Qingshan immediately started practicing. He moved his body and moved his limbs. Under the dazzling sunlight, an old ox and a young man sat in the shade of the trees. The old ox lay down leisurely and gave pointers. The young man's expression was solemn as he listened attentively. Although Oxen could not practice it himself, every word he said would hit the nail on the head. This made Li Qingshan suddenly see the light and gained a deeper understanding of the ox demon's fist of great strength. He practiced with more vigor. Although Oxen spoke carelessly, he was very satisfied with his disciple's comprehension, as expected of a person who had unlocked his innate wisdom. This kind of person would not live in the wilderness for long. It was unfortunate that he was born in a village deep in the mountains. His fate was really not good. He was like a dragon swimming in shallow water and a tiger falling into the plains. Otherwise, he would have stood out in any prosperous city, whether it was in martial arts or literature. He would have become a hero and would not have to suffer the anger of a few foolish villagers. Chapter 6. Oxen had seen many so-called geniuses, each of them gifted with extraordinary talent and godlike luck, but only a few of them were able to achieve anything in the end. On the contrary, many ordinary people who were originally unknown became famous and walked to the peak of the cultivation path. Over the past few years, it had purposefully watched on coldly from the sidelines, allowing Li Qingshan to go through hardships and trials. Only at the crucial moment would it speak up. It was like a master craftsman slowly tempering the material in his hands, all for the sake of forging it into a supreme divine weapon. What ordinary people cared about were external things like talent and luck, but it valued a person's will. If you were someone with a strong will, even if I gave you a great opportunity, would you be able to take it? Just like that, one was willing to teach and the other was willing to learn. Naturally, they improved at lightning speed. In less than 2 hours, Li Qingshan had a general understanding of the ox demon's fist of great strength and vaguely grasped the essence within. Although the ox demon's fist of great strength was a fist scripture, it focused on training the muscles, bones, skin, and flesh to strengthen the body. The fist technique was actually secondary. There were only 3 moves, divided into ox demon butts its horns, ox demon stomps its hooves, and ox demon flexes its hide. They were all the most basic moves of the fist technique, but they could go from simple to complex, giving rise to countless variations. Of course, mastery was one thing, and practice was another. If he wanted to achieve anything, he would need to grind away at it over a long period of time. Li Qingshan had already witnessed the 2 most basic requirements for practicing this ability, alcohol and meat. No matter what technique, it was impossible to create something out of nothing. To make a person powerful, there was a process of conversion, gathering the essence of the sun and moon, and absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. When one's cultivation reached a certain level, they could eat the wind and drink dew, abstain from food, and use the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to replace the food of the mortal world. Li Qingshan only had a mortal body. How could he communicate with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth? He could not find elixirs or spiritual medicine, so he could only use the most common things to constantly replenish and refine his spiritual energy. Even though Li Qingshan had eaten meat for a few days, his body was still not tough enough. He barely managed to practice the 3 forms once. Sweat poured down his body as he gasped for breath. His stomach growled. By noon, he ate all the wild boar meat as if he had been starving for 3 days. His appetite was even greater than the first time he ate meat. He could not lie down and rest even at noon. Instead, he meditated and nurtured his qi, experiencing the sensation of qi that he did not have. Only when his body had mostly recovered would he practice another set of fist styles. He repeated this several times until evening. Li Qingshan was completely exhausted. He did not even want to move a single finger. 3 shadows sneaked to the front of Li Qingshan's thatched cottage. Li Qingshan heard the noise and walked out of the gatehouse, only to see the 3 ruffians who often hung out with patch-haired Lu. He was afraid that they were here to avenge their big brother. He could not help but secretly complain in his heart. Right now he was exhausted. How could he be their match? Even on a normal day, he could not defeat 3 people. However, he did not expect that when the 3 ruffians saw him, they were like mice seeing a cat. They bowed their heads and begged, "Spare us." This made Li Qingshan stunned, and he asked, "What are you doing here?" Little did he know that patch-haired Lu's death had left the 3 scoundrels utterly terrified. They were afraid that patch-haired Lu would not stop even after Li Qingshan had killed him and would come to make trouble for them tonight. As a result, they came to explain themselves reluctantly. All they said was that they had been instigated and ordered around by someone. All of their crimes were because of patch-haired Lu and caretaker Lu. Li Qingshan said, "You don't need to say anything, I know all these things." That night, he heard everything very clearly, but of course he could not readily agree to it. The one who killed patch-haired Lu was him. The 3 ruffians' hearts trembled. When they thought of that night, this fiend was just outside the window, they felt even more terrified. Li Qingshan vaguely understood why these 3 people were so afraid. He remembered that in his previous life, the small town he lived in was once plagued by a murderer. All kinds of rumors were flying everywhere, scaring people to the point that no one dared to go out at night. Thus, he was given this kind of halo of a murderer. Evil people were also divided into different levels. The 3 ruffians were only small evil scoundrels who stole chickens and dogs. In front of a big evil scoundrel, like him, they could only bow their heads and listen obediently. His expression did not change, but his heart was somewhat strange. He had not yet mastered any magical powers, but because of some changes in his mind, his status in the village had undergone a tremendous change. And these changes were all caused by oxen. Perhaps this could be considered turning something rotten into something magical. Li Qingshan did not pay attention to them. He forced himself to practice Ox Demon's Fist of Great Strength one more time. This time, there were 3 people present, so he practiced especially attentively. He knew that right now he was only bluffing. If someone found out that he had exhausted all his tricks, the consequences would be unthinkable. The 3 ruffians carefully watched from the side. They had been in the village for so many years, but had never heard of Li Qingshan knowing fist techniques. In the darkness, Li Qingshan's movements were fierce and full of strength. It was obvious that he was not fooling them. They couldn't help but think of what the witch had said. Perhaps Li Qingshan was really possessed by a demon. Seeing that the sky was getting darker and darker, they were so scared that their stomachs cramped. They wanted to leave but couldn't open their mouths. They were afraid that Li Qingshan would suddenly reveal his true form and swallow them whole. After Li Qingshan finished practicing, he ordered, "Follow me." He walked out the door, minding his own business. The 3 ruffians looked at each other and had no choice but to follow behind him. At this time, many villagers were eating in front of the door. Those who were familiar with Li Qingshan carefully greeted him. Those who were not familiar with him hurriedly hid in their houses. Even though it was daytime and they had protected Li Qingshan out of righteous indignation, when faced with this murderer, there was no one who did not feel fear. The three ruffians usually hung out with Patch-Haired Lu. Patch-Haired Lu relied on his fierceness and still had some face in the village. They, on the other hand, were loathed by people and dogs, so they did not have this kind of prestige. For a moment, they forgot their fear and instead felt proud. If they could follow Li Erlang, they would be much more imposing than they were in the past. Some of the elders even sighed. Although Patch-Haired Lu was a scourge, they were afraid that an even bigger scourge would be born. At least Patch-Haired Lu did not kill anyone, so everyone was not that afraid of him. Li Qingshan also had an almost novel feeling. After walking this road that he had walked countless times, he clearly realized that he was no longer the Li Qingshan of the past. He came to the front of a thatched hut. Thinking about how not long ago he was in poverty and dejection, his heart was filled with emotion. Inside the door, the Li couple were trembling with fear as they pressed against the door. Elder brother Li had a wooden stick in his hand and eldest sister Li had a kitchen knife in her hand. What those ruffians were afraid of, how could they not be afraid? However, they were different from those ruffians. In their hands, they held the money from selling the land. If they gave in to Li Qingshan, they would not be able to keep the money. Therefore, today they did not even do any farm work. They just stayed at home and discussed for the whole day. In the end, it was elder brother Li who made up his mind. He's only one person. Do we have to be afraid of him? If he dares to come, I will help the Li family get rid of this evil creature. But before he could say these tough words for long, he saw Li Qingshan come to the door with 3 people. He was so scared that he immediately hid in the house. Li Qingshan said, "Drag them out for me." The 3 ruffians were intimidated by his power and did not dare to defy him. They were experienced in bullying commoners and shouted as they barged into the house. The Li couple immediately laid down their weapons and surrendered. They did not dare to fight back. They were so scared that their faces were ashen and they trembled. Second brother, what are you doing?" Elder brother Li squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying. Li Qingshan said, "I'm not here to look for you." He said to eldest sister Li, "Evil bitch, it's fine if you humiliate me, but yesterday you dared to humiliate my parents. Today I will not forgive you." Eldest sister Li was so scared that her legs turned to jelly. She no longer had her usual arrogance. "Little waiter, I was just talking nonsense. I have taken care of you for more than 10 years. We are family." Li Qingshan laughed coldly. "Family? It's fine if you don't want to talk about it. But if you talk about it, there are still debts to be settled. Let's talk about yesterday's nonsense first. What are we going to do about it?" A skinny, monkey-like ruffian said, "There is no need for you to do it. Little brother knows the rules." As he said this, he rolled up his sleeves and slapped eldest sister Li's face. Li Qingshan grabbed the ruffian's hand. Yesterday in the ancestral hall, he really wanted to do this. But today, seeing their trembling faces, he could not bear to do it. After all, these 2 were his own brothers and sisters-in-law. How could he let them be humiliated by such a ruffian? But what must be done, must be done. He had an idea and said to elder brother Li, "Could it be that the people she scolded were not your parents? Don't you know how to teach them a lesson?" Elder brother Li came to his senses. Yes. Afraid that Li Qingshan would not be satisfied, he used all his strength and fiercely slapped eldest sister Li's face several times. Eldest sister Li's face immediately swelled up. On the other hand, Li Qingshan felt that his elder brother looked very satisfied with the beating. He did not know whether it was because he wanted to take the opportunity to take revenge. In any case, his anger had mostly dissipated. He asked, "You said it was family. Let me ask you, where is the money from selling the land?" Eldest sister Li's red and swollen face immediately turned pale. Elder brother Li also lowered his head and did not say anything. The money was their flesh and blood. Li Qingshan was cutting off their flesh. Compared to returning the money, they would rather suffer a beating. Eldest sister Li suddenly became unreasonable. "You can beat me to death. Beat your own sister-in-law to death. Let's see if the authorities will come to arrest you." "I don't know what kind of money there is. If you want it, go ask Steward Lu for it." Li Qingshan said sternly, "Do you really think I don't dare to?" This was no longer an act. The murderous aura he had when he killed patch-haired Lu last night seemed to have returned to him through the darkness of the night. The reflection of the blood-stained, wide-eyed youth in the stream had already become one with him. The three ruffians on the side felt their bodies go cold. They could not help but take a step back and look at Li Qingshan in fear. Eldest brother Li and his wife were even more frightened. They had never seen such a terrifying person in their lives. It was hard to imagine that the person in front of them was Li Erlang, who they had lived with for more than 10 years. Finally, a bag of silver was handed over to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan weighed it in his hand and looked at the pale faces of eldest brother Li and his wife. He sighed in his heart. Just for this bit of silver, they had to force their own brother to this extent. He turned around and left. The three ruffians hurriedly followed. Eldest brother Li and his wife were about to hug each other and cry bitterly when the bag of silver slid across the air and landed in front of them with a thud. Welcome to Legends of Cultivation audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.